Hey Pat, I just wanted to shoot you a quick video here of what you're going to be looking for when you get this axle. This is a brand new axle I have here in stock, and I just wanted to show you that there is a left and a right. A lot of people don't know this and they put them in backwards. Let me see if I could do this with one hand. If you take the axle, you measure from the end to the keyway. Let me see if I can get this. You can see I got 12.5 on this side. And if I go to the other end and I measure the keyway, I have 14.5. So the 14.5 inch side would be your right side. That's the side that's going to be sticking out the furthest from the frame. So make sure when you're building an axle, I always write right on the right side. I put a big R, I put a big L on the other side. Also, you want to make sure the axle's clean before you start assembling it so everything can slide together. So that's step number one. Just so happens we have the motor out of Ash's car. It'll be easier for you to see what I'm looking at here. Now remember, quick rule of thumb, the axle is going to want to go, or the force is going to want to push this axle as you're making a left-hand turn to the left. So if you notice, everything that you're trying to keep from sliding on the axle has double collars. So your hub, double collar. You don't want the hub to be pushed in as you're making that hard left. Then you get to this bearing, you got double collars. Again, to keep the axle from pushing to the left as you're making that hard turn. On this car, I got the hydraulic brakes, which your car, you have manual. You will have to take the brake caliper off. You got to unbolt it from those two screws, get it out of the way. Then as you come through, you got your gear with your sprocket. Now, when you're taking these sprockets off, the thing you got to remember is there's a bolt where the split is. Take the bolt completely out. After you take the gear off, because the gear is holding the two halves together, take the gear completely off, take the bolt out, and take a wedge or a screwdriver and drive it down into the crack to spread it a little bit so you can slide it on the axle. You're going to do the same thing for the brake caliper. That has a split hub on it. You're going to take the caliper completely off the hub. You're going to loosen that bolt sticking up and the bolt on the other side, and you're going to split them so you can slide it. You never want to put the disc brake or the sprocket on those hubs until they're almost in the exact location you need them. And again, the best way to do this is to drop this axle out in one piece, measure everything, and switch it over to the new on the bench so you're close. On the left side, there's only one collar. And out here on the left side, there's only one collar on the outside of the hub. That one was on the inside, had doubles. Again, you're trying to keep the hub from pushing off. This side doesn't have as much pressure. You don't need two collars here. I've seen people do it, but not everybody. Now, your swing arm should have what they call a dropout. That's these 9/16 bolts here. There's four. There's two here, and there's two on this side. If you take that piece of subframe out, then you undo your bearings, the 3/4, 3/4, same on the other side. You should be able to take this side of the axle and drop it down out of the subframe and be able to slide the whole axle out as an assembly. Now you need some height to do that. It's got to be higher than what I have it right now, because you have to get this side, the left side, down as far as you can so that that hub will snake through the frame opening. It's got to snake through the opening when that bearing comes off. So again, take those four off. Let the two bearing carriers, the axle drop, take off your disc brake caliper, slide the whole axle out, make sure you mark this is your right side, the other new axle as your right side, and transfer everything over. I can give you some basic dimensions so it's located. Let me have the tape measure, Ash. Yep, that was a new axle. Thanks, Ash. So from the bearing to the outside of the axle itself, I'm right about 11 3/4. So that should just double check with yours. And then I keep this in about a 1/2 inch and I keep the other side in a 1/2 inch. And these hubs are major adjustments for handling. You could slide them in, especially the right side. You slide the right side in to tighten the car. You slide it out to loosen the car. I don't think there's much else I need to show you. Possibly, ignore our notes here on the table. The clutch shoes. I told you to watch that video on TV, on YouTube. The clutch shoes only go in one way. You'll see there's a large nub here as compared to a very sharp nub here. So you got sharp to sharp, flat to flat or large. And this flat edge is where you have to locate the keyway next to it, not over here. Locate it next to the fat boy. I call this the fat boy. And that fat boy, when you put this on the motor, has to go on just like I'm showing it. So that rotation, the fat boy is going to lead. So the motor turns this way, this leads. If you put it on backwards and you put the sharp edge leading, your clutch will chatter like crazy. So make sure they both go on the same way. When they're on the clutch or on the crank, you line up the keyways. You see the keyways? I'm lining them up. Everything lines up. If you take them and flip them over, or you got one backwards, and you line up the keyway, look at the way they sit. Don't line up at all. So again, you want to make sure that you got the keyways lined up when they go on. They're going to go on the motor just like that, sliding on. Fat boy leading. You want to make sure the shoes look pretty thick. These shoes we have been running all year. These are the shoes off of Ash's car because we're in the middle of changing the motor. So that's important that they have some good meat on them. The other thing is the drum. We were talking about the drum. Okay, the drum, you want to sand it. We haven't, oh yeah, we did do this one. The drum you want to sand, that inside leading edge with like some 40 grit, 36 grit. You want to keep it scratched up in and out so that the clutch shoes have something to grab. When you take this retaining clip off, you'll see that in the video, your mandrel will drop out. In there are 2 needle bearings. You want to wash them out with some brake clean and you want to put just enough grease in there to lube them. Basically a pinky. Rub it in and that's it. Then, like I was telling you at the track, when you put this mandrel back on, you go to put that C-clip in, it fits in a groove, you want to add some shims so that this mandrel goes in and out very little. Because if it pushes in, like yours was that night, the grease is going to blow out of here and go all over your clutch shoes. You get no traction. So you want to keep, there's a felt washer on the inside of this. You want to keep the felt washer in good shape. You want to make sure that that's seated all the way in. And then like I said, I usually keep it sitting like this. And when I go to put that clip on, I make sure I add some shims in there to keep that from going back and forth. When you put this all together on your motor, when you take the clutch off, which I think we had it off that night, you're going to have a washer or spacer. This bevel edge, one side has a bevel edge. That goes against the motor. You'll see that the crank where it comes out of the side of the motor has a bevel. That has to fit against that bevel. If you do it wrong, you'll break the side cover. So double check that. That goes on first. Then a washer slides on. Then a clutch shoe in the correct location or direction. Then another washer. Then the next clutch shoe. Then your hub slides over everything. And you put the 3/8 24 fine thread grade 8 bolt back in here and tighten it up. And you should be good to go. This is the crank saver that we were looking at that night, that the stands were messed up on yours. When I put this on, make sure it slides on nice and easy. When this is all in the car and bolted in place, you also may want to add a shim, if it needs it, between this aluminum plate and the clutch. That's why I got this washer here. Mine just happens to be, I put that on, then I put this on. And when this metal aluminum plate bolts to those standoff rods, It takes up all the play, gives me just a little bit that it's not binding, but it keeps that chain from going back and forth. Once you have this set bolted in 100% and done, that's when you align the sprocket on the axle to the motor. So the motor has to be in place, bolted down with the plate, straight in the frame, clutch assembled, then you adjust that left or right so it lines up. And the way I test that is once the chain's on, I spin the tire, give it a quick spin, let it come to a stop, and look down at the chain. See where it's riding on the sprocket. If it's tight to the left, move the sprocket to the right. If it's tight to the right, move it to the left. You want that sprocket dead center of that chain. Also, another little trick is the keyways. Every one of these is going to have a keyway. If you look right there, there's a 1/4-inch key. After you get it in, you get everything adjusted, and you bolt this down tight, put some silicone on it like I did. You see it blobbed on there. That keeps those keyways from slipping out. You see it on the other side too? I do both sides of it. I don't know what else. Like I said, I think that's about it. That should get you started. That'll give you a couple hours worth of work, and then call me if you need me. Talk to you in a bit.